Hello, this is Mr. Sportsman. I am going to show you some techniques, different techniques on steelhead fishing. And some might not be so popular, some are very popular, and maybe some harder techniques to learn. I'm going to show you one technique right now that is very, very unutilized, is using plugs. Okay? I use a 9-foot plug rod for steelhead. It's right here. This is actually a Hottentot. Very good. Very good, fishing deeper holes. Very good on, fishing maybe some seams. Very good, very good on fishing, structure. I can't tell you how many, you can go out there and fish, a plug, and you fish structure, or you fish a real deep hole. There's times out, you can go out there and, you can just hammer fish on plugs. And, very, very productive, especially, in the winter months, early fall, very good early fall, and I'm going to show you, on some of the plugs I have. I'll show you over here. And here's some of the plugs I have, This is my Hottentot box, Got, this ain't all of them, but, these are just some of the ones I got. And right here are, are my wiggle worts, very productive, in the winter time or early spring, or, even when you go out there and, even when you go out there, in the winter time, fishing those deep holes, is very critical on where you're fishing or how you're fishing that plug. Very critical. Always remember, you can fish that plug 10 different ways. You can cast them. You can back troll them. You can, there's so many different types of techniques you can use just for plugs, but so very unutilized. Not many steelhead fishermen use plugs. As a steelhead fisherman, as me, I'm taking at least 2 different types of applications I use for steelhead. It could be plugs, I could be floating, I could be bottom bouncing, and I'm going to explain to you on all 3 applications and how productive they can be. Okay?
Go.
Alright, now I'm going to talk about my float rod. This can be extremely critical. I have seen people, float for steelhead, and they have a lot of problems floating for steelhead. It's either, they're not mending their line properly. Mending your line when you are, using a float rod, length is extremely critical. I think the perfect float rod that I use, the one I have right here, right in front of me, is a 13-foot. It's actually custom built just for me, how I like it. But I think the perfect length for a float rod is 13 foot. Everybody has their own preference, but you want that longer rod, so you can mend your line, and so you don't have to use, you can use less effort on mending your line and keeping that line straight while the current's going down the river. Very critical, floating's very productive, fishing seams. You can fish deeper holes. And one good thing about, float fishing, you can continue, to adjust, the length of how far you want your leader. Just like this. I can just pull my bobber. If I wanted it, this is probably what, 2.5 feet. If I wanted to, I can just pull it. Now I'm fishing maybe 4.5 feet. It's that simple. Very critical. Depending on where you're fishing and how you're fishing it. I'll show you some of my floats I use. This is just beginning of the season. There's no really I'm not really rigging up right now, but very soon I will be going out there and hopefully getting some beautiful chrome. But right now I'll show you some of the floats I use, and maybe how to maybe in a later episode I'll show you how to rig a float properly versus the grams of your float. That's very important versus, on, the current float or the weight you're using. That's very critical too. So I think the float I have now is an 8 gram. The current isn't very strong, so I can go out with a lighter gram. But when you float, you want to make sure that, your jig or your spawn or your skein, you want to make sure it's completely vertical. You don't want it going to the side, or you want to make sure your bait that you're using floating is completely, you always want it completely vertical. That is very important. And I like to try to keep my jig or where my bait that I'm using for steelhead, I like to just keep it just maybe a couple inches off the bottom, depending on the situation, especially when it's in the colder months. I want to be down a little bit deeper, Very, very critical on that part too. I've been steelhead fishing for about a little over 15 years, and I think I do very well. And I'm going to show you some floats right now, what I have. These are some of the different floats I have. Different grams for different conditions. Here's a nice steelhead jig I use. Here's a pink worm that I use for steelhead. Just different grams of floats and depending on the different conditions. And, that's another very important thing. Knowing when to use certain, applications for certain conditions. You'll see a lot of steelhead fishermen out there, they only love to use one type of application. No, why not, go out and further your, what you can learn more out there, So I've gone out there countless times, I'll go out there floating, I'll out there, 3 hours, not even a bite. I have my plug rod on me or something like that, or my bottom bouncing rod on me. I'll go out there, they don't want that application today, I'm floating. You better believe I'm going to have more of my other applications I'm going to be fishing. Might be, using plugs, might be bottom bouncing, but I've also noticed as a steelhead fisherman, using plugs, after I'm floating, man, it can be night and day. Night and day on, depending on the application that you use. Don't always just use one application. Very critical. Now I'm going to show you my my bottom bouncing technique. And now I'm going to produce my bottom bouncing technique. Now this is another very important. Your rod is also very important. I use a 10-foot medium light. All my rods are medium light. But with the bottom bouncing technique, is, I think, is very critical on the tip of your rod. You know, of course, you don't want to use a a plug rod for bottom bounces. It's a totally different type of application. Um, like especially in the colder months, you gotta have that very, very, very light tip. So you can feel those subtle bites when that water is super cold. You know, so I go out there, and it can be January, and I can go out there and you know I can feel them with that tip on everything. I can feel the bottom. I can feel the slightest little nick. If I steelhead hits it, even when the water's super cold, I can still feel on if it's going to be the bottom or if it's going to be a fish. That's where that tip comes in very, very handy. And like another thing with bottom bouncing, you can be out there, 3 hours, you can go out there and, adjust your weight 6, 7 different times. Just for the simple fact is, the water flow is changing, or the water's lowering, or it's getting higher, Go with the tide of, the river that you're fishing. There's times I've gone out there and I use, a 5/8, in the fall time or springtime. And it can also, I can change my weights, several times. But the thing is, you don't want your sinker dragging. They call it bottom bouncing for a reason. You don't want your weight to drag. You want it to bounce. You can have, as long as you can feel that on your tip of your rod, you can see it bouncing. If your weight stops, it means you're too heavy. You want it to continuously going down that seam or going in that hole. You don't want it to stop at a certain area. You want to always have control of your bait. Very, very critical on the bottom bouncing aspect. And also, you can go out there, and I've always done this, on different techniques. You can go out there and, your leader line is very critical too, and you use for bottom bouncing. I usually start off with a 3-foot leader, and depending on how deep I am, I might go a little bit deeper, or a little, might go a little bit deeper. I might make a little bit longer of a leader, depending on the depth I'm using. Very important. I also, if I'm out there fishing for steelhead and I'm out there fishing 2 hours, not even a hookup. So what I do a lot is I'll change my leader size. This can be another critical aspect of catching a fish or not catching a fish. If I'm using a 3-foot lead, I might, believe it or not, I might only make it a longer by a foot. And continue experimenting on what I'm doing on bottom bouncing. Because, all the applications that you use, especially for steelhead, presentation is the key. So critical. And you go out there and you don't after an hour or so, you don't go out there and bottom bouncing and make after another hour, adjust your weight. Maybe it could be something simple as that. Make your leader longer or even shorter. Always experiment on what you're doing. There's times I've gone out steelhead fishing and start off at a 3-foot lead, maybe a 1/4 ounce weight, and I won't get nothing all day, but I could be fishing at the same area because I know there's fish there. all of a sudden, you know, fishing, I can make that one subtle change, and I could literally clean the house. It could be anything from my leader length, or even to my weight size. So important. Always remember, you know, if you've never caught a steelhead, you know, maybe the best thing for you to use, just for a beginner, is, you know, maybe using a plug. Go out there and use a plug rod. Go out there and buy yourself, you know, an 8-foot, 9-foot medium light action plug rod. That's perfect for beginners. You know, and you know, if you get, you know, you go out there and you don't like plug, listen, floating's a little bit harder, but because you have to know how to mend your line, you know. But you know, having a longer rod, you know, you can go out there and mend your line as long as you know, keeping that line behind the bobber. You don't want that line in front of the bobber. Very, very critical, you know. So, you know, all I want to help you guys, you know, catching more steelhead. That's the main part, you know. Always remember, don't always just have one type of technique. At least every time you go on the water, at least try to have two. Very important, because it could be a matter of night and day, and depending on, you know, you're going to catch fish or you're not going to catch fish. Now, I have fished some of the hardest rivers, you know, in the state I live, and I do very well, very, very, very well. Just, you know, because I always bring different types of techniques, you know. So if you continue, you know, to learn one technique, then go out and learn another, you know. You know, that's the key, you know. And you'll notice a lot of steelhead fishermen will only have one. Why not have multiple? Very true, you know. It's either you're going to catch fish or you're not going to catch fish, you know. And so I'll show you a simple, you know, bottom bouncing rig that, you know, there's different types of bottom bouncing rigs out there, but this is one of my favorites that I like. You know, I think it's a pretty easy setup. But yeah, I'll show you, you know, right over here. Alright, I'm back, and I'm going to show you just what a little, you know, bottom bouncing rig looks like. You know, at least the one I have confidence in. Like I said, there's multiple different bottom bouncing rigs out there. This one I have the most confidence with. You know, you gotta have confidence in when you're fishing. You know, very, very important. And you know, you can go out there, you know, easy way. You know, just have a, you know, 3-way swivel. You know, not very big. Then, you know, for your weight, you know, just tie a line to your weight and tie it, you know, to one of the parts of the 3-way swivel. Then, you know, your leader, this ain't my leader line length I've always used. But, you know, you can always, you know, adjust your leader length on your, you know, how can I say this? You know, like with your presentation, you know, because the longer, you know, the leader you have can, you know, really affect on the presentation of your bait that you're using. Also very important, you know, this is just a little fly I use sometimes for steelhead. I just did it real quick just to put it together, you know. You know, so, you know, another very, very important aspect. You know, here's some of my, you know, bottom bouncing stuff I use. And here's some of the flies I use, you know. I don't just use flies for bottom bouncing, you know, I use, you know, spawn sacks, or, you know, I'll use skein, you know, just depending on what I like to use, is depending on the time of the year, you know, what the fish could be doing. If they're spawning, you know, I'm going to throw, you know, spawn or some kind of egg pattern. Another important, but if it's in the fall time, you know, I might throw, you know, a hex or a egg sucking leech or something like that. And so, you know, another important factors, you know, so I'm here just to, you know, give you guys maybe, you know, someone that's never been steelhead fishing and, you know, learning a couple of different techniques that you can use for steelhead. Um, so, you know, if you ever have any questions, always message me, you know, and don't forget to like and subscribe because, you know, there's going to be a lot more videos coming. And if you ever have any questions about steelhead tactics or techniques, always message me because, you know, I will always, you know, respond back, you know. So I hopefully see you guys on the water and hopefully we can get some nice steelhead coming up real soon. You guys take care and keep a tight line. Thank you.